Good afternoon, my friends. This is Paul, and today we're going to talk about my actual personality type, the ENFP. I know I've been saying that I'm an ISTJ this whole time, but I gotta come clean, guys. Have you ever heard of something called a persona? I've been putting on an act this whole time, and it's time for me to truly embrace my full self, to be honest with you for the first time in 11 years. I am going to really show you who I truly am, and by doing that, we are going to explain all 8 of the ENFP cognitive functions so that you can see for yourself that I have been misinformed and misguided this whole time, and I am actually truly an ENFP. So without further ado, let's get into all 8 of our cognitive functions. The first cognitive function of the ENFP is extroverted intuition. This is an idea gathering function. It loves to look outward, outside the box, so to speak, to find new solutions, new ways of looking at life, as opposed to the ESFP and the ESTP. ENFPs as well as ENTPs like to think about intangible possibilities. So as opposed to the ESFPs and the ESTPs where they like to look at tangible possibilities, things that are actually possible, ENFPs and ENTPs are going to be like, oh, cool, a bear. That reminds me of this. And that reminds me of this. And it somehow all comes together. I know for me, I really love to gather ideas. I love to think about how we can innovate and move further in life. I'm actually thinking about getting a touch phone pretty soon because why would I want to bother carrying around an old flip phone when I can discover some new technology, new apps? Oh my gosh, the possibilities are endless. Being extroverted intuition, ENFPs also like to think about the possibilities of those around them. So a lot of times they can use their extroverted intuition as a way of thinking of new ways in which their friends can improve or their friends can do something new. I have a friend of mine, you know, all know who it is, it's Danielle. And she's constantly saying, oh, Paul, you would be so cool if you were a voice actor. So she's pointing out that external possibility. Now, that may sound like an FJ thing at first, but the FJs try to look at the potential that's already there, but people are suppressing. Whereas the ENFPs are going to look at this unknown, untapped potential and try to fully bring it out of the person. Now let's move into the secondary function, which is introverted feeling. This is where we are really truly in touch with our inner emotions and our inner values. So in touch, in fact, that a lot of times people call us emotional vomiters because we just let it all spill out. If we are sad or happy or angry or another random cool emotion that no one's ever heard of, we're going to tell you. But yet there's still going to be an element of holding back at the same time. It seems like kind of a contradictory thing where, like, on one hand, ENFPs wear their hearts on their sleeves. We love to just let you know whatever it is we're feeling. And we love to make sure that everyone knows that we are being our true and genuine, authentic selves. But yet, at the same time, because it's introverted feeling, it is based on our own internal morals and our own internal emotions. So most of what we feel is going to be interior. So I guess you could say in that respect, even though the FJ types don't think about their own emotions, at the same time, their emotions are going to be slightly more on the external side. So when they're seeing someone that's sad, you're going to see their entire face contort. And when they hear something happy from someone else, you're going to see a giant big smile. Whereas with the ENFPs, they can be like that, which we'll get into when we get to the shadow functions. But for the most part, if they're hearing someone else's emotions, their faces are going to be more unreadable. Not totally. We're not talking about those ISTJs here. But to a certain extent, they're always going to be, I guess, you really have to get to know an ENFP to truly know what they feel, which again sounds like a contradiction because they love sharing their emotions, but at the same time, there's so much inner depth that it can make the ENFP sometimes think that they're introverted. Because when they get older, they start to realize that there's value in actually thinking about their emotions first and then idealizing second. So there's often a stereotype of ENFPs like to put their foot in their mouth. They say whatever comes to their mind and they blurt out their feelings only to realize that maybe that wasn't the most sensitive thing to say because they're not extroverted feelers. So they do what feels good to them in the moment when it might not have necessarily been the best thing to say for others. Now let's move on to extroverted thinking, which, along with introverted feeling, I just forgot to mention it because I'm such a scatterbrain, is the same middle functions as the ESFP as well. Extroverted thinking is a function that's all about efficiency. It wants to know how to get the job done as efficiently and quickly as possible. Additionally, people with extroverted thinking in their function stack, which are all of the FP and TJ types, they like to think about what is objectively true as opposed to what is personally true. However, with ENFPs, it's in the third, so that means that sometimes they don't always like to be productive, and sometimes they reserve their extroverted thinking for when it serves their needs. So they might have an idea, but they don't just want to keep it to their head. They don't just want to keep it as just a fantasy or just an idea. They want to actually make it happen. So an ENFP might have an idea, and then the extroverted thinking is going to say, how are we going to make this idea possible? What resources do we need to really make this dream a reality? However, they also run into the trap of, because it's so low and their intuition is so high, that ENFPs are sometimes called the starter types by the Linda Barron's type interaction style. And as a result, they start a lot of things because they have so many ideas, but they haven't developed their extroverted thinking enough to be able to actually finish the project. So they often have a lot of manuscripts and a lot of projects that they just didn't have the motivation to continue. I know for me, I have a whole lot of novels and I have all these cool ideas that no one else has ever heard of because I am so original, and yet I've never published any of them. I finished three of them. Well, I guess you could say finished because, like, I haven't completely edited them and gotten rid of the plot holes, but it takes too much commitment, guys. Like sticking through with something to the end, it's so very, very tiring. I'm just so sick and tired of all the perseverance required to get done with a project when I could just be working on some other cool thing. So why bother finishing a novel when you can just do something more fun? Extroverted thinking also comes across when the ENFP gets more confrontational if their values are compromised. Unlike the INFP, ENFPs are slightly more comfortable with kind of telling it like it is and giving hard love. They'll never let it overtake their more kind and caring side. But at the same time, if you get an ENFP mad, they're going to act more like an ISTJ or an ESTJ, where they're going to be like, "What the heck, dude? That was so stupid." And it's going to come across as more emotionally driven as opposed to, like, say, the ESTJs, where they're going to think about how it's being unproductive and illogical. So ENFPs, they have their moments where they can be logical, but they're not introverted thinkers. So they're not going to think about the logical principle behind things. They're going to think about how it is. I know I have an ENFP friend, Danielle, can never stop thinking about her whenever it comes to these examples. And she is, for the most part, a very bubbly, super excitable individual. She's always talking about how happy she is and how thrilled she is at how much I'm living up to my potential. But then she has her moments where she really tries to plan out the most efficient way to have either a hangout or a phone call or whatever it is we're doing, and then it almost seems like she turns off a switch in her brain and becomes a completely different personality type. So for instance, in previous years, she's liked to watch my Games of the Year list. But this year I told her that they were a bit on the long side because I am such a rambler. I just don't know when to keep things concise. And she said, well, how about this? I'll watch it on my own time and then I'll take notes because Just spending all that time watching a video is just a waste of time when we could be hanging out. So she's thinking about how that's taking too long and not allowing us to truly have a proper hangout where we can exchange ideas and talk about our developments in life. Next up, we have the inferior function, introverted sensing, which is also the inferior function for ENTPs. The way I've heard introverted sensing described in the inferior is that it can lead to these types being pretty forgetful. They often will not really keep track of their day-to-day activities. Oftentimes they might forget what they said just 5 minutes ago. But another unfortunate side effect is that they don't like being categorized. They oftentimes don't really like the Myers-Briggs very much because they think that it limits them. If there's one thing an ENFP and an ENTP hate the most, it's a cage. They don't like people to say, well, you're an ENFP, so therefore that means that you can't do this. They'll be like, no, I'm my own person, I'm an individual, and I want to spread my wings out. I want to be free as a bird, flying through the skies. And I can attest to that very much so. I like to think that I can be whatever personality type I want. If I want to be an ENTJ, then I'll be an ENTJ, whatever. You guys can't stop me. It also leads to them having an extreme dislike of routine because the ISTJs and the ISFJs, oh, they can be so annoying. They always want to do the same thing over and over again. And ENFPs get bored by that. They say, that's not allowing me to really idealize and come up with new possibilities and new ways of doing things. So their introverted sensing in the inferior is going to say, I don't like the routines. I don't like being held back by the past. I want to do something new. However, because the fourth function is sometimes called the aspirational function, it means that deep down inside, ENFPs want to be more organized. So a lot of times if you go on, say, an ENFP Facebook group and you get the ones that are a bit older, like in their 30s, 40s, and beyond, they'll often talk about how they admire ISTJs and ISFJs and like are actively implementing methods in their life of giving them more structure. Some of them will deliberately eat the same cereal over and over again, and while they hate it, they realize that it can be good for them because their life is just filled with chaos. I know for me, I've been thinking of my diet recently, and so experimenting with all this different types of cereal is not going to be very healthy. So I recently decided to embrace my ENFP side and say, you know what? Sorry, I said ENFP side. I meant my ISTJ side. And say, you know what? I'm going to stick to Raisin Bran because Raisin Bran is healthier and I need to learn to have more discipline in my life. Goodness knows that I just go with whatever my feelings tell me and I just don't have the willpower to effectively stay with a particular routine. So I'm going to specifically choose Raisin Bran because I need more structure in my life. Goodness knows none of these videos are scripted anyway, so maybe that could be something I could work on, is I can aspire to have my videos be more organized. Additionally, if we are to believe that Linda Behrens is the absolute sole authority of Myers-Briggs and typology, introverted sensors in general, no matter what they are, which are all of the SJ and NP types, are going to speak in the first person a lot, and they're going to share their own personal experiences over the experience of others when they're reminiscing. So ENFPs a lot of times are not going to have the best memories, but a lot of times if a memory has particular sentimental value to them, they're going to focus a lot more on what they got out of it. But because their introverted sensing is inferior, they're not going to go on and on about those boring sensory details that the ISTJs love so much. Instead, they're going to talk about what they felt. So they're going to say, I remember when I went to this conference that I felt so happy because the talk made me feel so wonderful. It made me feel so loved and appreciated. I think a lot of people might think that ENFPs just don't like to think about the past at all, when it's really they don't like to be limited by it. They don't like to use the past as an absolute for making decisions and going about life. They use it as more of a means to an end, like, okay, yeah, that was fun, but moving on, I don't want to only think about that. Now let's move on to the shadow functions. Next we have introverted intuition. Now, ENFPs a lot of times don't like to think about things too deeply. They don't like to look at hidden meanings. They like to look at alternative meanings. They like to think outside the box as opposed to inside the box, like the introverted intuitives like to do. So I know for me, like, I enjoy being able to see things from a new perspective. But every now and then, if there really is a true hidden meaning, I can appreciate the INFJs and the INTJs in my life. They can offer some pretty good insights, and sometimes they have this like mind reading ability where they can pick up on the vibes of something and say, oh, I can tell what that actually means. And I'm like, really? I was thinking that it meant something totally different. And so I can sometimes appreciate being around the INFJs and the INTJs in my life because occasionally I like their deep methods. I like to be able to challenge my brain, but I don't think I can do it naturally. I'm just naturally an idea gatherer at heart. And so rather than try to look at one thing and be focused, I'm going to want to look at a bunch of things and try to connect them together. Next, we have extroverted feeling. So ENFPs can occasionally have their consoling and more compassionate sides to them. But at the same time, they're never going to let it overtake their own emotions. So for ENFPs, they might like really want to help people. They might like want to console people when they're sad, but they're also going to put a limit on it because if they're too sad, then they're going to say, okay, this is too much. We need to be happy again. So I know my friend Danielle will often say, like, if I tell her that I'm sad about something, she'll say, no, 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 don't be sad too much. I want to hear happy stuff. This is just bothering me too much. And she won't let me talk about scary video games because they're just too scary for her. So even if I'm personally passionate about something, if it means that there are going to be too many negative emotions, that's going to make her sad. ENFPs are counselors for like 10 or 20 minutes and then they're going to move on to focusing on their own emotions. So they just can't stop themselves from being selfish. That's why when I went on mission trips and I was a candle holder, I enjoyed it at the time, but man, I needed to get out of there and go back to me being happy and go back to my own positivity because man, those poor teenagers having so many struggles. I just couldn't take all of the sadness. I needed to get out of it. Next, we have introverted thinking, which is the ENFP's blind spot. And I've heard multiple conflicting reports about this. One person said that the way blind spot introverted feeling is described is that it means that these types think anything is possible. And man, I can totally see that for us ENFPs. We do love to think about our ideas and new possibilities. And so if we can think it, and if maybe people think outside the box, then maybe it's possible. Who knows? Maybe chocolate can rain down from the sky if we're able to properly develop the technology that allows us to overwrite the rain clouds. And instead of water evaporating, we just spread chocolate everywhere and have the chocolate evaporate. I can't talk today. And it can also lead to us being, I guess, okay with moral relativism because your morals might be different than mine. But at the same time, not, which makes us kind of hypocrites because we tend to think that our values are the values. We're a bit more tolerant than the INFPs where they're like, no, this is my value and my value goes and I'm the only authority. Whereas we're a little bit more flexible. We are actual perceiving types, unlike them where they're technically judging types. So we like to keep an open mind. We like to gather information and make a decision later. Another way that I've heard introverted thinking described in the blind spot, which I think makes a lot more sense, especially because ESFPs also have that, is that we don't like looking at the logical principle behind things. In fact, we don't really like thinking about logic at all. A lot of times, logic kind of gets in the way of us really being able to be ourselves. And so we don't really think about what makes sense and what is objective. We like to think about, is it fun? Is it going to make us happy? That's all we care about. We don't care about sensical stuff. Leave that to the smart people. We want to do our own thing and not be limited by, oh, it has to follow logical consistency. Yeah, we just want to do our own thing. Just leave us out of that. And finally, we have extroverted sensing. We are completely clueless of our surroundings. We are the types of people that'll bump into poles, trip over our own feet, and generally speaking, it is very hard for us to live in the moment because that means paying attention to all those pesky tangible details. If we do that, we're not going to be able to truly imagine ourselves. When I look at this chair that my computer is perched on, I don't want to see it as just a chair. That's too boring. I want to look at it as a mean beast, like the arms of the chair that are ready to reach through the screen and grab me and squeeze the life force out of me. Because that's just way more fun than just living in the moment. ENFPs also, being intuitive types and dominant intuitives at that, are usually thinking about the future, not so much a genuine straightforward path to the future like the INFJs and INTJs, but external possibilities, which can lead to them sometimes feeling a bit directionless because they'll have an idea for how their future is going to be, and then they'll have a new idea, and then they'll switch goals. So they could learn a thing or two from the INFJs and INTJs by saying, you guys actually stick to your goals. We need to learn from that. But it can also lead to ENFPs being extremely non-observant and missing out on what's right in front of them. We're not going to pay attention to all the beautiful sights around us. We're going to pay attention to what the sights could be as opposed to what they are. So that's why we don't need all those boring sensory details. So with that, thank you so much for watching my video. I really appreciate it so much. You guys are the best. Give me a hug. Oh, I appreciate you so much. If you could leave a comment, I would be so grateful. I love reading what you have to say, and I'd really love to get into a nice, fun conversation with every single one of you. I also want to make sure I don't forget about my patrons. I forgot what their names are, so I'm just gonna say whoever you are, thank you so much for your financial support. It means the world to me, as I really want to make sure that I support my family, and you guys are able to do that for me, so I'm so grateful for you all. I wish I could really show you the full depths of my gratitude, but you can only do so much in front of a computer screen. So with that, thank you so much for watching. Thank you so much to that YouTuber that said I was an ENFP. It has really helped me be my true self, and I feel so glad being able to finally embrace the side of me that I've repressed for so long. I no longer have to feel like I'm pretending to be an ISTJ. Whoever thought I was an ISTJ, whoever you are dead wrong. You just don't know anything about Myers-Briggs and functions. I just went through all four, and I demonstrated that 100% without a doubt, I am an ENFP. I hate my routines. I love trying new things. I hate looking at the logical principle behind things. I am 100% an ENFP. Debate me in the comments, but not too much, because I'm sensitive. I don't want to hear all your insults. I'm not an ENTP, please. I'm fragile. I have a poor heart. I'm gonna cry if you insult me. So thank you so much for watching. I hope you all have a wonderful day. Remember to keep the faith, stay epic, and God bless. Bye, everyone! Being an ENFP is tough.